Hello, everyone. Today we have with us Dr. Soumya Balasubramanya from the World Bank. Thank you so much, Soumya, for joining us today for this conversation. We are all looking forward to hearing what you have to say. So, why don't we start with our first question. Tell us a little bit about yourself and including a fun fact.
All right, I'm Soumya. I am currently with the World Bank. I used to be with the CGIR for many years before I jumped to the bank. My research looks at the nexus between natural resource management and poverty reduction. And I use results from my research to inform government policy and programming. And my work has been used by many countries in Asia and Africa
Fabulous.
to move development planning money around or to support government policy in different countries. Fun fact about me, Soumya Balasubramanya is my sort of the name under which the world knows me, but it's not my name legally. Legally, I don't have a last name. And so my first name also becomes my last name. And that might help some of you sort of get around this confusion of what is Soumya's name because, lots of people try to find me using the name Soumya Balasubramanya. They're not able to necessarily find me in official systems, and then they're wondering, how do I find you? And that should explain, that should explain what's going on with my name. So there you go.
And I think because this is the fun fact you so choose to share with us. Our last question on this interview is, how would you like to be contacted? So I think that could be a little bit of a pickle. So everybody, stay till the end when, Samya gives us an idea about how to, reach her, given that you work in different parts of the world. So yeah, what sparked your interest in working at the intersection of natural resource economics and development economics, poverty reduction studies, so on and so forth? Was this like a person, an
Hmm.
event, something? How did you get interested?
Um, I don't think it was any one thing. There's some amount of serendipity to it. I mean,
Sure.
I grew up in India, you've grown up in India too, Simanti, so you know this. I mean, the one thing about growing up in a country like India is even though I may not be poor, you are surrounded by the poor all the time. And it's pretty stark and it's pretty in your face.
That's right.
We're not shy about hiding our poverty in India, right? And I think it kind of it does make you think about, what do you have, the circumstances of birth, the fact that so much that's going to happen to you in life is a function of where you were born. And
Absolutely.
despite whatever opportunities
Mhm.
might come to you and, you might work very hard and all of that is there, starting points matter. And
Absolutely.
so, I mean, I don't think we can disagree with that. And I think there was just a couple of things. I remember when I was a student, I was getting a master's degree in India. Oddly enough, the World Bank contracted the Delhi School of Economics to go collect data for them, to do surveys in some of the poorest parts of India in Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh, in communities that are reliant on forests. And it was the first time I ever got involved in actually generating data, running these surveys. I was an enumerator. I was administering surveys in Hindi. We were collecting all this data, and the bank was trying to estimate at that time whether joint forest management programs
Mhm.
had reduced poverty in these areas. And I think that's where maybe the idea, oddly enough, sparked that, this seemed like an interesting area of research where you could look at, environmental amenities and poverty and look at the nexus between these two issues.
Mhm.
I think that's what got me interested. And then, I did an internship while I was still studying in India. I wrote for the Economic Times, which is this daily newspaper in India,
Awesome.
back when people actually did read newspapers. And so, and so, I used to write opinion editorials for the Economic Times on again issues of natural resource management and poverty. And then I realized if I really wanted to do research, I need to go get a degree. I need to go and learn how to do research, right? Because research is not about the answer. It's about the question and how do you go about answering the question. And I think that's what got me to go and get that degree in.
That's right.
But even while I was getting that degree, I was always I always felt that academia was not my place, that I needed to go and I wanted to be able to do rigorous research, but I also wanted to do it in an environment where it can be used. That's what motivates me. And I guess this is where I am.
No,
Yeah.
that's great. And you mentioned two things which I find very profound. One is the accident of birth, and I am oh, my personal life, my professional, it's all like the fact about me being born where I was born at the time that I was born impacted my entire life. And the other part about the research being about the question and the process and not only the answer, because I feel that students we all get trained to find an answer to the question, and sometimes in that we lose appreciation for the process
Yeah.
and the question in itself.
Yeah.
I think that if you really want to be a good researcher, a good scientist, whether it's a social or otherwise, you have to have that appreciation for the process as well. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. So my next question is, can you tell us a bit about your experiences working for the various non-academic organizations that you've worked with globally? What are some
Mm.
of the exciting things that you have done? What is the most enriching aspect of your work? So I'm like packing in three questions, but then there's so much to talk there, I would imagine, and so
Yeah.
exciting.
Um, so I've always done research in non-academic settings.
Mhm.
Um, it's a fairly niche field. There's academia that does research.
That's right.
Then there is policy, and policy does not have to be driven by research. You can do policy without any research.
That's true.
And then there is that space where you do research and generate rigorous evidence for policy.
Hmm.
And that last bit, it's a fairly narrow space. There aren't very many organizations that kind of balance those two. The CGIAR does it, and the World Bank does it to some extent. Development banks in general do it to some extent. And so the difference is that, and this is not a criticism, it's just an observation.
Sure.
I think when you are in a university system, you tend to think about what is the paper that I can write that signals to my peers and my seniors that I am a clever scientist worthy of tenure. And when you're in a non academic setting, when your work is financed by governments,
Mhm.
you think about what's the problem at hand, what knowledge is missing that prevents this problem from being addressed or takes it one step closer to a solution, and you answer that question as rigorously as you can. So there's different motivations that guide it.
Hmm.
And I think that's the big difference between the two. And therein lies what's exciting about it and what's enriching about it, right? Because you generate these questions in collaboration with government agencies who are trying to solve a problem. You are answering this question, keeping in mind everything else that's happening around you. So, the answer to your question is not something that you view in isolation.
That's right.
Whatever answer you get, you have to view it in the light of everything else that's happening around and interpret that answer and what does that mean. And I think what's enriching about is when you see it kind of, you kind of see your work taken up, be adopted, moved into legislation, moved into regulation, moved into kind of influencing how development financing is implemented, where money goes, moves millions of dollars of money around. That's fun too.
Oh, I bet it is. It goes outside of publishing and takes your work. really out into the real world. I'm not saying publishing is not important, but there are these other facets that
Yeah.
research informs, which,
And to be fair,
yeah.
every piece of work I have done for government has been published to in an academic journal. So I think there is a tendency to think that there is research for academia and then there's research for policy. Those two are not mutually exclusive.
And I
It is
appreciate you
perfectly
saying
possible
that.
to do research that does both. And there
And
are
yeah.
people who do it. I have done it. By I'm not by, the only person who does it. There are enough people out there who do it. It's just that it doesn't get talked about enough. That's all.
And that
But there
is
are people out there who are doing both. Yeah.
No, and a big part of having my goal of having these conversations is about making sure that, these things that you are talking about is out there for people to see so that, typically, specifically, students and early career
Yeah.
researchers, regardless of where they are,
Yeah.
in a university setting, not in a university setting, developed country, developing country, they
Yeah.
know that there are others who believe these things, which gives them kind of like, I don't know, legitimacy or the license to think like this too. I think
But
that's
it's an
very
interesting
important.
thing. This
Yeah.
whole research for academia versus research for policy, this dichotomy is strongest in the United States. If you go to low income countries, that's not how people view it.
Mm-hmm.
They tend to
Fascinating.
think that you want to do research that speaks to both.
Fascinating. Fascinating.
So, in my observation of having, and a lot of my work is in collaboration with local universities. And by local, I mean it could be a university in Tajikistan, it could be a university in Ethiopia, or it could be a university in the United States, if
For
it's on something
sure.
related to the US, right? I feel this dichotomy is for what it's worth. This is an observation. It's just my personal observation. It's strongest in the United States. It's less strong in other places.
Nice, nice. That's such a like a I wouldn't expect that. So that's something new that I have learned today. So
Yeah.
moving on, can you've talked about already. You've talked about work in the U.S., Tajikistan, and
Hmm.
I know you worked in Sri Lanka. And what was the other one? What was the other country that you? I know you've been there. Yes,
Ethiopia,
Ethiopia.
Nepal, Niger, Morocco.
That's
I worked in a
right.
lot of
That's
places.
right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
can you describe
Jordan.
one? Oh, yeah, that's can you describe one I know you have many. One interesting project that has been impactful, and you're currently working on or worked on in the past, and something surprising that you learned from it. Because so much of research is about discovery, right?
Yeah, it is, and it's also about questioning assumptions. So I
Mhm.
think, so there's different ways in which this happens, right? So one very quick example is, we spent 4 years evaluating the effects of interventions that USAID had financed back in the day in Tajikistan. These were interventions in water and land, so essentially agricultural and irrigation based interventions. And the idea was to see how these interventions actually led to improvements
Mhm.
in the lives of sort of rural Tajik populations. And if they're not working very well, what can be done in order to tweak them? And what's interesting about this is the timing of such an evaluation matters. This evaluation was done at the point where the first phase of investments in the country were coming to an end, and government, so both USAID and the Tajik government were preparing for a second wave of investment. So the idea is, what do you learn from the first
Right.
wave to improve in the second wave, right? So timing matters for a lot of this. And what we did was, so we did this, massive impact evaluation of, it was basically a nationally representative evaluation study of all farms in Tajikistan, because it has to inform national policy, right? So
That's
you
right.
have to have you have to have large sample studies. And so it took us a while to design it, but we designed it and we were talking about results in sort of as they were coming in, as data was coming in, and as we were, analyzing it, we were discussing behind the scenes with the Tajik government, with USAID in Tajikistan. And what we learned was that indeed these improved, these investments in the first phase had considerably improved economic lives and livelihoods. But there's a gender disaggregated, but there's a gendered effect. So farms that were run by women were not benefiting as much as farms run by men. And the reason is simply because it's very common for model farmers to be male, right? And so when training in all kinds of agricultural interventions happen, the lead farmer is typically, the person whose name is on the title of the land, right? That happens to be male. Now in Tajikistan, at that time, this was between 2014 and 2018, male migration is very high. Like almost something like 45% of households have migrants and the men are all abroad. They're working overseas. So when the men leave, the women are left to manage the farm. And while husbands may transfer some information on what needs to be done to their wives, they don't necessarily transmit all information that she needs in order to secure access to water and other inputs for her farm. So what we realized was it was essentially a lack of awareness in this particular case. And so what that meant was not just USAID financed programs, but in general government extension programs, right? You needed to have female trainers. You needed to change how training happens. Training generally happens, you take the men to the city for a few days, you house them there, you train them. You can't do that when the farmer is a woman. She cannot leave her mother-in-law. She cannot leave the children. So you have to take training to the village. You have
That's
to
right.
organize daycare so that, the kids can run around while you, impart the information to the women. And so you have to literally change the way you do this stuff. And so we made those recommendations, and actually they were taken up.
Wow.
The government and USAID created a cadre of female trainers to training to villages, and then they did an evaluation of this later on that showed that women's incomes went up as they did this. So that was really sort of helpful and useful. It was a useful thing to do. It was very impactful. That's kind of one example. There are other pieces of work that I have done, in terms of looking at why sometimes and I actually am a big champion of studying failure because failure is surprisingly universal.
Yes.
So something is a really good idea and it doesn't work. Nobody takes it up. Why? Right? You're subsidizing all these pumps in Ethiopia, massive subsidies that are being given, and yet uptake is very poor. Why? There is alternate ways of cultivating rice. You don't have to transplant. You can use a technology called directly seeded rice. Heavily subsidized in India, particularly in the northern parts where a lot of rice is cultivated. Yet adoption is very poor. Why? So I love looking at why things don't work because it tells us something about how you can go ahead and restructure where you put a subsidy, what you support, rather than marrying yourself to some process which is not anyway being taken up by anybody. So why not modify the policy itself to actually do things that might actually help people? So that's the kind of stuff that I like to think about.
That's awesome. I sometimes, I'm not very good with these things, but some interviews lend let's say some of my guests, the way they share stuff, it lends itself to hashtags. And I think the hashtag from this interview is study failure. I had a hashtag previously which was like, what was it? Be nice, say no. That was related to what that guest had said. So yeah, study failure. I love that. So, moving on, in the near future, are you looking forward to learning any new skill or method or tool that you feel will help you do your work better or anything?
I mean, I feel like I should go ahead and learn how ChatGPT works. I'm not sure whether it'll necessarily contribute to my success, so or the lack of it, or so to speak. But I feel like everyone's using it, and I have yet to use any generative AI for anything. I haven't done it so far. And I'm like, should I? No, maybe I should. I don't know. Maybe I should. I have very mixed feelings about it. I feel like I shouldn't do it, and yet I feel like I should since everybody is anyway using it. Might as well know, maybe I should know how bad this can be or how dangerous it can be or whatever it is, I mean, I feel like, yeah. So I'm very ambivalent about it at the moment. Well, rather I have very mixed feelings about it. So we'll
If
see
it
where it
makes
goes.
if it makes you feel any better, last night I wrote up a abstract for a conference, and typically this is what I do. My knowledge of generative AI is very limited.
Yeah.
So usually I write something up and post it on ChatGPT and give it like a prompt of make the language better or something like that. I will say this with great pride. Most of the time, the language remains the same. But here's something to contribute more to your ambivalence is that then when I reviewed the abstracts, there were at least 3 or 4 errors. So I'm like, nope, I am not using this. I'm using what I created. So if that, delays your process of trying out ChatGPT or any other generative AI client, then there is that. But, looking ahead in the next 10 to 15 years, in your opinion, what are the most exciting things to look forward to at the intersection of the kind of work that you do?
Oh, I mean, there's so many things to kind of think about, right? In a sense, we're battling, for the lack of a better word, two huge issues. One is there's still a lot of poverty, and you could think of uh, so you have that issue, and you can think of poverty as a distributional problem, and not just a distributional problem of current endowments, but it's also at one level that those distributional problems of today are operating against the arc of history. There's not much you can do about history. You can't change history. I mean, it's happened. You have to acknowledge it. But it does have a bearing on what will take and not take today, right?
Mhm.
And then you have an multiple environmental challenges, right? Where you have, from the poor's perspective, land degradation continues to be a big issue. Climate change and what it will do to agriculture and how it will affect yields and incomes of poor farmers, disasters, and frankly, just war, violence. I mean, these are very big realities that we are sort of, battling together. And so you have a distributional problem and all these environmental problems which come together. And at one level, it sort of compounds, it's all multiple market failure if you think about it, for the lack of a better word. And I use the word market very loosely, the inability of a society to have peace, to prevent war, to have conflict. And then you have all, it makes it very hard even for economic solutions and economic instruments to take, right? Because incentives operate in a larger realm of what has historically, politically, socially happened, and what institutions are capable of doing and not doing, and frankly, what I would just call integrity, you know. And so if the capacity of institutions is poor, or they have been compromised, because integrity in the political space or the public space is breaking down, no amount of good ideas, subsidies, taxes, reforms are necessarily going to be a substitute for a lack of integrity. And so, and in that context, we all the more need to be careful about the kinds of questions we ask,
Mhm.
because it's not like we're in those contexts, we're not even talking about bringing people out of poverty. Now we're talking about preventing people from falling even further into despair and distress, right? And so the kinds of solutions you end up implementing are going to be different there.
That's
And
right.
I think in that sense, it's a great, I mean, it's a terrible place to be from the perspective of what's happening in the world. But from a research perspective, it's actually a great place to question many of our assumptions and to take a step back and to be able to say, hang on, in this place where you have violence and conflict and all these problems, what is the role of these kinds of incentives? Do we need to sort of rethink, how we frame these narratives in our own head? And and so in a sense, it's a great time for introspection. It's a great time for looking into these kinds of questions for sure. So I think in that
Absolutely.
sense, from a research perspective, there's a lot to do.
Study failure, question assumptions. I'm keeping a
Yeah,
tally in my head.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
looking back, is there any
yeah.
valuable piece of advice that you wish somebody had given you that in your as you were building your professional career?
um don't be so scared. I think there's a lot of fear. There's a fear of sort of the known unknowns. There's a fear of the unknown unknowns. In generally, I think, there's a lot of fear. And especially when you're a grad student, you're fearing. I was at least very fearful of, oh my God, I'm going to fail. Oh my God, they're going to send me away. Oh my God, I'll never get
Thought
my
so.
dissertation
I thought
done.
so too.
Now I have my dissertation. Oh my God, I'll never be able to do any research without my advisor. Oh my God, I'll never be able to publish a paper. My career is going to be over. Who's going to take me seriously? I'm going to be a joke. There's a lot of fear. Then there's, of course, that's me. And I guess in academia, the fears are: will I make tenure? Am I an imposter? Will I be regarded to be smart enough? I feel everybody, lot of people go through versions of this fear, so to speak. Um, yeah, I wish that somebody told me, don't be so scared. It's gonna be fine. You will figure things out.
I
And the thing
sincerely,
is, it
yeah.
is. I mean, there are a lot of good people in the world. You'll meet a lot of nice collaborators, nice colleagues, people who are happy to kind of take you under the wing, to give you your space to figure things out. And that happened for me. I mean, and I was not in an academic environment. I was, and yet I worked with people who are like, yeah, here are your resources. Here's some space. Go figure this out, right? I mean, I think we should have a little more faith in our, yeah, and a little more magnanimity. Yeah.
I think that's a great point. I have fair amount of fear, and I have a colleague in my department who just by saying one thing changed it to a very large extent, because he said, Dr. Corey Walters, he said, oh, this is a review comment that you cannot address. You're having a hard time addressing. But this is where research is. This is the fun about research. This is the
Yeah.
challenge. This is the excitement. And I'm like, it took me a while to
Yeah.
process that and re-gear my head in some sense
Yeah.
to think
Yeah.
about the excitement of it. And this
Exactly.
is really nothing to do with where I am professionally. I think
Yeah.
that, yeah, that's awesome. That's so useful. So moving on, what are and you've shed some light on this. What are some of the key differences between academia and non-academic research organizations? And should people wanting to be in these roles come with specific skills in hand?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of soft skills. So, we talked about the difference between, how the research question gets set is somewhat different in academia and non-academia.
That's
But
right.
apart from that, you interact with a lot more people in a non-academic setting as you conceptualize and implement your research.
I
So, in a
see.
sense, you're getting feedback, technical, but also cultural, political feedback on your work as you implement it. There is this perception that somehow research should not be political. But the fact is that research is always political. Even in a university environment, what gets funded, what doesn't get funded, um, what what's allowed to be published in the top journal of your discipline versus what is not, it's always political. Small p, not big P. It's always political.
That's right.
And in academia and in non-academia, it's the same thing, except governments are also kind of saying, all this is fine, but this is the bigger question that we are struggling with. This is, you're talking about a second order problem or a third order problem, but our first order problem is something else entirely. And until we solve that first order problem, we can't come to these second and third order issues, right?
That's
And
right.
so, in that sense, I think the one thing in academia is that in non-academia is that it becomes very clear early on that, you know, uh, research is not It's not some abstract thing that's sitting in a vacuum devoid of everything else around it. Um, it touches many things, and so kind of gets influenced by it, and morphs things, and it gets morphed by things. It's a
Mm-hmm.
two-way process.
Mm-hmm.
But I think research in academias and universities are the same too. It's just that maybe it's less explicit, but it's not as if it's not sitting in isolation, or it's sitting in some tower of its own, as people somehow think it does. I don't think that's true in academia either, but it's very blatantly obvious in non-academic settings that it's not. Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I am taking away from what you're saying is in a non-academic setting where you're dealing with so many different types of people, stakeholders, funders, you have to have a thick skin.
Oh
You
yeah.
have to be able to be okay with somebody saying that this is not right, or this is trivial, or this makes no sense.
And also to be willing to push back when you need to push back.
Hmm.
So, there are things governments don't want us to look at because it doesn't make them look good. So how do you navigate that? And that doesn't necessarily mean shutting your research down. It just means, what do you offer in exchange that says, look, the reason why we need to look into this is because of this particular thing. Here is how it'll help. Here is how it'll benefit. You know, and to be fair, uh, the the way any piece of research, it doesn't matter how well it's done, it will always, at least in among the things that I am concerned with,
Right.
we're not talking about cell biology here. I'm talking about, people and the world, and how people, make decisions, and how incentives affect what they do and they don't do. No matter what I do, we're only capturing a very small part of the larger story. So part of it is also, the results that you get. How do you find humility in what you're finding?
Hmm.
Because you're not looking at the whole picture. You can't. It's physically not, it's just not possible to look at everything. You end up saying, okay, there's this big complex problem. Here are all the different pieces of the problem. I can't look at every piece of the problem. I can look at this part of the problem. And so I need to remember that I'm looking at this part of the problem when there are all these other interconnected problems. And then, the recommendation I make has to acknowledge that we only looked at a small part of the larger problem. So part of it is, how do you also sort of, communicate that? That's
And yes,
another thing.
I genuinely believe that we need more humility in research. I genuinely believe that, last two questions really. What guidance do you have for early career researchers, scholars, such as yourselves, who want to develop a successful career outside of academia or even inside of academia? Really, clearly there is a distinction. They are two different beasts, if you will. So, and you've said that there are different, yeah, as I said, distinctions. So, what advice do you have?
I mean, I think a couple of things. One is, I would just say the same thing. Don't be scared. In a sense, if I edit a few journals, I'm on the editorial boards of a few journals, so I see a lot of manuscripts and handled reviews. And they're all sort of in economics, applied economics, right? We see a lot of very elegantly done work, very beautifully done work. But the question is, it's not necessarily adding a lot to what we already know about this topic. So the one thing I would encourage a lot of young researchers to do, and I know it's hard when you're particularly in academia, when you're up for tenure, I know it's hard. But people in non-academia can certainly do this, which is ask bolder questions, even though you may not be able to answer them so elegantly. And by elegantly, I mean, cleanly, beautifully identified, sort of nicely done. There are many questions which are important. You're not going to find a clean and elegant answer. They'll be noisy, but I actually think that noisy answer is quite helpful in terms of understanding a problem better and moving that conversation along. That's one thing I would say. Um, and the other thing I would say is, a lot of what you think is self-fulfilling prophecy. It is perfectly possible to have a successful research career outside academia. It's just a different game and a different beast, but it is possible to do so. And for particularly all sort of the international crowd in the United States, right? Students who are international, who are not US citizens. Don't be scared to go back to your countries or leave the United States and go do other stuff. I did it, and a lot of other people have done it, and we've had very uh, re- fulfilling and rewarding careers. There's a lot of interesting work happening in universities in Asia and Africa. If you're particularly interested in development, or you're interested in solving problems that are, closer in geography to the places where you were born and where you were brought up. I mean, I believe, I'm a global citizen. I believe the world is my home. But, geography, passports, and visas are a reality. And if it means going back, leaving the United States, leaving Europe, go do it. I mean, there's a lot of really good work happening in many, many places. Don't be afraid to link yourself to it and build on it. Actually, that's where the fun is, to be honest with you.
That is very, very inspiring, because one of the things that I tell my graduate students is that always be willing to embrace change and be nimble on your feet.
Yeah,
I don't think that is ever a that is ever bad advice in the short term or in the long term, to be able to adapt. The other thing that I just want, if I may add to what you said, is although in academia the incentives are different, it
yeah,
is, I think what I would add to what you said is, if you are passionate about an idea, park it. I say put it on
yeah,
the side burner,
yeah,
not the back burner, maybe the back burner or the side burner, and see if you want to revisit it in a
yeah.
few years' time.
And
Excellent.
like I said, it's all self-fulfilling. I mean, many of my collaborators are academics, they're on tenure track, they've made tenure. It is perfectly possible to bring in good work is good work. It doesn't matter where it happens. And so I think it's perfectly possible to bring these different stakeholders in and work together and do very meaningful and well done work. At one level, for those of you who have the privilege to be able to kind of, get these networks together and kind of build on them and work on them, please do it, because you're actually, I think, there are enough people, I think, who have that kind of privilege. So use the privilege you have. Don't feel guilty about the privilege you have. Use the privilege you have and build social goods that benefit other people as well. That's
Awesome.
that's what I
Mhm.
would that's what I would suggest.
Great.
None of us is responsible for kind of where we were born, but conditional on where you were born, there will be some advantages you have. Use those advantages and build social goods.
Great, great. So, final question. Are you open to being approached by other researchers wanting to collaborate or just to interact with you? And if yes, how would you like that to happen? Are there meetings which you attend regularly? Do you have a social media presence? Could you share something?
Yeah, yeah. Feel free to contact me if you want to collaborate, or if you just want to chat, or you want ideas for research. A lot of what I'm doing these days is I don't have the time to work on all the ideas that I have. So I'm very happy giving away ideas for research and then, collaborating with you guys if you think that's of benefit to you. And I work on water, I work on forests, I work on land degradation, land restoration, pretty much anything at that nexus. I work on energy and poverty. I mean, anything at that nexus of sort of ag, environment, energy, poverty, water, I'm happy to get my feet into. It's very easy to contact me if you Google my published name, which is Soumya Balasubramanya. I have a website, and that will tell you how you can get in touch with me. And yeah, I attend the AAEA very regularly. I attend the ICAE,
Mhm.
which happens every 3 years. And if the AIRI accepts papers, I'm very happy to attend the AIRI as well. I'm very happy. In my personal life, I'm single and fairly solitary, but in my professional life, I'm intellectually polygamous. So I'm very happy to go and collaborate and talk to anybody who's
Love
willing to
it.
talk to me. So there you go.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing, all of your wisdom with us. I know the audience will really appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thank you, Simanti. Bye. See
Bye
you.
bye.